Hello, my name is Wes Morgan and I'm a data development specialist here at IMPLAN. Today, I'm going to be going over a first look at the 2020 occupation data within the IMPLAN application. This video will not give an overview of what the occupation data is and how to use it. For that, please visit support.implan.com and navigate to the article and video combination titled Using Occupation Data in IMPLAN. Alternatively, the article and video combination titled Occupation Data Video Primer Exercise and Exploration Guide fills a similar purpose. All right, to jump right in, I'll first address the structure of the occupation data as it relates to the 2020 release. Occupation and core competencies data is structured identically to the previous release from 2019. This means that the occupations themselves and the coding schemes remain the same. So the numerical 6-digit codes that represent each job description are comparable between years. There are a couple of changes within the names of occupations, but these are really very minor and almost exclusively have to do with grammar. For instance, a change in the placement of a comma or the addition of an S to make something plural might make an appearance, but this does not change what the job is itself. The definitions of each job have not changed, and a full list of what each occupational code represents can be found via a downloadable attachment in the article titled Occupation Details, which is once again found on support.implan.com. There are also no changes in the assumptions used to produce the occupation data. That same occupation data details article contains a brief overview of the production methodology used by IMPLAN to generate this data, including any assumptions used. That means that the major differences between 2019 and 2020 data sets are really going to come down to the numbers themselves. That is, how occupation data is distributed from existing IMPLAN data. As a reminder, occupation data in IMPLAN is prepared as a series of ratios at the national level. These ratios are then applied to IMPLAN's industry data in each geography that IMPLAN data covers, meaning that the occupation data that can be used down to the zip code level. Each industry has only one set of national ratios, meaning that the difference in regional data are informed only by industry data. There are no distinct occupational ratios for states, counties, or zip codes. As a result, comparing occupation data year over year is really akin to comparing industries between years. And we can glean the most important information by comparing data at the national level. For more information on appropriate use of the occupation data, please visit support.implan.com. So to take a look at what did change at a high level between the years 2019 and 2020, it is best to look at occupational ratios multiplied by national IMPLAN data on industries. We should note that the impact of COVID-19 is expected to be a major factor in differences between the two data sets. While job counts and distributions fluctuate year to year in our national economy no matter what, it is important to keep in mind that 2020 will be an unusual year in terms of looking at broad-scale pictures of the economy. Some of the largest shifts in job counts nationally can likely be attributed to the pandemic's impact. As conventional knowledge tells us, many jobs were lost in the year 2020 as industries were forced to restructure. In order to begin forming a picture of what we might expect related to those losses, let's first take a look at some popular articles that detail job losses by type of occupation. The following slides represent some of the most accessed pages in relation to this subject. Wall Street Journal detailed that the most heavy occupation losses occurred in the leisure and hospitality and service sectors. AARP published an analysis stating that the most impacted occupations were those found within leisure and hospitality, mining, travel and transportation, construction, motion picture and music, laundry and personal services, self-employed, and manufacturing sectors. Economic Observatory indicated that accommodation and food services, administrative and support roles, and construction roles were among the hardest hit occupations. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics has projected that the non-residential building construction, food service and drinking places, traveler accommodation, and transportation industries will represent the largest decreases in rates of employment change compared to their baseline growth in the coming years. So how do IMPLAN estimates match up to this in a preliminary look at the 2020 data? To analyze this, we took a look at the changes in jobs from 2019 to 2020, sorted by number of lost jobs and percent of lost jobs, estimated by using our occupational ratios within IMPLAN industry data. The following results are all presented at the detailed level code. So to start, let's look at the number of jobs lost just by sheer number when comparing national data between years. Occupation code 353031, waiters and waitresses, saw a decrease of almost 683,000 jobs between these 2 years and account for just around a 25% decrease. The next highest job count loss were for fast food and counter workers, retail salespersons, cooks in restaurants, and maids and housekeeping cleaners. Each of these losses represent a pretty substantial change by percent in the workforce as well. But by percent, the largest decrease for an occupation was for occupation code 393021, motion picture projectionists. The estimated 21,042 employees from 2019 decreased to around 1,657 employees in 2020. Of course, 21,000 employees in a single detailed occupation code isn't that much to begin with when we're looking at the entirety of the United States, but this still does represent a 92.13% reduction, which is the largest reduction by percent for any occupation. All in all, these results do seem to match up with conventional knowledge about the 2020 year and with the articles cited above. Because this data really represents the multiplication of an occupation ratio by total wage and salary employment, it's important to keep in mind that IMPLAN industry data is going to have a large impact on these figures. I'll touch more on that later, but for now, let's take a look at some of the increases in occupation changes for these years. Among our largest increases by both percent and number of jobs were the following occupation codes: 291221, 291223, and 291228. These are all medical occupations and fall under the broad code of 291210, which is just physicians. The number one growth occupation was 291228, physicians all other. So let's take a quick look at that code. The occupation estimate for this yielded an increase of 921,805 jobs between the year 2019 and 2020, which accounts for a 228% increase in that occupation year over year. So what does this mean? Did we really add that number of physicians to the US workforce? Well, probably not. We know that while the US workforce can adapt and can be really nimble, it's probably not realistic to assume that we just so happen to graduate a lot more doctors from medical school this year when compared to the last. It warrants further inquiry for sure. So let's take this example to explore how we might explain this type of a shift in IMPLAN's occupation data. Well, one of the first things to look for is to check what this occupation includes. Occupation codes, even at the detailed level, often contain a large variety of positions. So it's important that we always keep in mind what we're really dealing with. Looking at the raw occupational employment statistics data, we can see that this occupation includes cardiologists, dermatologists, neurologists, pathologists, emergency medicine doctors, and radiologists. None of those things really seem to fall outside of what we might expect to be in this detailed code at first glance, but it's definitely always good to check. Next, let's take a look at where this occupation appears. So 291228, physicians, all other, shows up in 51 IMPLAN industries. As each industry has an occupational split that grants distribution of wage and salary workers in each industry to all jobs in that industry, it's really important to look at those splits to see how they change between years. So between 2019 and 2020, the employment share, which is what dictates those splits, for this particular job rose in all 51 industries with the exception of 5. So the number of doctors out of the total workforce for each of these industries really did increase. That, combined with changes in the employment counts for those industries, which can be positive and negative, as a net leads to a higher count overall for this occupation. So while the raw number of physicians increasing seems a little staggering at first, it certainly can be explained by the data that we use as an estimate. It seems pretty straightforward that there indeed were more medical professionals working during the height of the pandemic in 2020, and that industries with medical professionals could have grown. The combination of a larger employment share and a growth in industries can lead to changes in the occupational data. However, we at IMPLAN do not alter the raw data in such a way to smooth out any curves. This highlights the need to use IMPLAN's occupational data in tandem with our industry data as a supplement. In a smaller geography than the whole of the United States, you're really unlikely to see such large shifts. But it's good to keep in mind that these are estimates and they're based on the existing workforce. So this really just kind of highlights that need to keep things in perspective. And remember that these are nationally produced figures. In summary, we thought we could give a couple of wide-ranging thoughts on some of these shifts between occupational data and on comparing this data year over year in general. The same line of thought that we use to track our example with physicians could be applied to all industries and all occupations. So for instance, when we were talking about that 92% reduction in motion picture projectionists earlier at the national level, this really is likely just a symptom of a decrease in jobs in the film industry in general, which again seems to match up with what outside sources are saying. This decrease may not refer specifically to that occupation. Rather, the distribution ratio for motion picture projectionists in combination with a shift in industry data leads to some large national changes. While these kinds of shifts might initially seem like a limitation of the IMPLAN occupation data, note that IMPLAN estimates using national ratios actually form a pretty solid baseline estimate for studies. This is especially true when you're looking at full impact analyses within the tool. Once you run an impact, you'll have a generalized estimate of what occupations are expected to exist within your analyzed industries. If you compare the composition of the workforce of an industry that's having an impact in a regionalized economy to that baseline, this can prompt you to answer some interesting questions. They might be things like, how does my industry differ from what's typical? What do those comparisons mean? Does the mix of jobs in my particular industry compared to that baseline reveal something about the structure of my industry? Keep in mind as well that all of those questions and insights have only really been explored in the 2020 data in this video in terms of jobs. So the IMPLAN data release also includes data for wages and hours. Those same questions and thoughts can be addressed for those, as well as things like knowledge, skills, abilities, education, and work experience and on-the-job training, which form our core competencies data. Diving into the 2020 occupation and core competencies suite of data is sure to yield some fascinating results. As mentioned and explored earlier, comparing year over year is really only useful at the national level. But that being said, the newest release of this data should be an excellent companion to your typical IMPLAN studies. As we expand on this, we here at IMPLAN are excited to learn from you and to assist you in producing the best studies possible. So if you do have any questions around this data or around completing studies in general, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. IMPLAN employs a full suite of economists that are eager to assist our customers in producing the best studies possible. So we strongly encourage you to make use of those resources. We can be reached at support.implan.com. Thank you for watching.